hey, Sean, this is the fourth creative challenge, I think, and this was writing a children's story, a short one. I don't know how many words mine ended up being, but this was a tough one for me because right now I have a 4-year-old whom I read to all the time. And we're reading all kinds of stories. We've now started reading chapter stories like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Charlotte's Web, Mouse and the Motorcycle, classics like that, which are longer, but then we've also been through all of the shorter, fun poems and things like that, and these children, the board books with the thick cardboard pages. So many of these things are so simple. It was an easy one to say, like, oh, I could write a children's story. Yeah, no problem. And this was one where I quickly was humbled, and things came into perspective of, hey, this is a lot harder to do. And I think in some ways it's like comparing a painting to a sketch, where in a painting you can add a bunch of details and layers and texture and color where there can be more interpretation. But when you sketch something, it's so simple that you can tell what it is or what it isn't right away. And I feel like trying to write a children's story was difficult because there's nowhere to hide. It has to be efficient, but it has to be thoughtful and good. And so I'm not gonna read mine to you. I'll put it in the description or something like that if you really want to read it or link to it somewhere. But for a long time, I've told my son Larry the Lion stories, which is this character that exists in our home. And Larry does all sorts of things. And it turns out he usually does a lot of the things that my son is about to do. And like right before my son started swim lessons, Larry started swim lessons, wouldn't you know it? And right before my son learned to ride a bike, Larry was learning to ride a bike. And it turns out some of the lessons that Larry came across in these stories, we were able to reference while we were experimenting with learning ourselves. And so I kept this as a Larry the Lion story. But what struck me right away is, again, when everything's stripped away and you're trying to write a very simple story, too much exposition, too much backstory, and a kid loses interest. You have to, I feel like with so many stories and with so many videos that I create, you're allowed to paint this picture of a world and explore it with a character and then start to introduce some struggles to that character, and then you're off on the adventure. But with a good children's story, you gotta get right into it, because that time of just sitting in a world where nothing's really happening is very limited, for my son anyway, and for his classmates, the ones that I went and read to them. And so as I came up with this outline, and it's the lazy writer's outline of Larry the Lion tries to write a story. It's tough, but he does it. That's my summary of the story. And knowing that that's what I was going to do, I was able to outline it. And my outline was Larry reads a story he likes. Then he decides he would like to try one himself. He struggles to think of a story he likes, and he gets so frustrated he spills water on his train set. And while cleaning it up, he has an idea for a story about spilling water, and he writes the story and shares it with his friends. So that was the outline that I went with, and I thought, that's fine. And I didn't want to push back. During this creative exercise, I didn't want to get too hung up. I wanted to learn the lessons. And by exploring this, I started to learn them, and I think I could go back and rewrite it and revise it and turn it into something I'm prouder of. But for me, what I was looking to get out of this, I got out of it in my first and then second draft. But what I noticed right away was that when I'm writing, to get from bullet point A to bullet point B, you can get there really, really quickly, and trying to decide to pepper in a lesson, to pepper in even when to say someone is speaking, like when something is happening, do you say Larry asked them for help? Or do you say Larry said, "Excuse me, can I have some help, please?" Knowing when to do those things took some thoughtfulness, and I don't think I got it right, but I don't think doing one, like if every time Larry was talking, I feel like that would start to be like, oh, okay, we don't need to hear you every time, but also to not give him the voice, you got to find that middle ground. And so it was interesting going through this and deciding when to elaborate and when to keep it concise, when to put it in the first person, when to put it in the third person. And through this, I just felt like I learned a ton. And this was something where, compared to talking, which I'm very comfortable with in these videos, writing is slower for me. I write much slower. And so when I write, I think a little differently, and I think more slowly. And it helps me to think differently because I'm thinking more slowly. And that struck me right away. So I'm going to go back to the questions here, the 8 questions, the 8 lessons of what can you get out of this creative exercise. This is what I got out of it as a video producer. But one, do some research, find some examples, and I've read a ton of children's books. And all the time I've been looking at them and thinking like, oh, that's pretty good. I might be able to do better. I don't know. Like everyone looks at art and does that. And so quickly when tasked with actually trying, did I find out that it is very, very difficult to do something beautiful and simple. It has to be simple. If it's too complicated, it loses its value and it loses the attention of the reader. So doing some research and finding examples, I do this so often I sort of accidentally did all the research, and so that doesn't really apply as much as a lesson I could learn. Noticing where I struggle. Patience, as always. I want to type faster. I want to get it done. I want to finish the first draft so I can start on the second draft. But yeah, I struggle with knowing when to elaborate and when to move more quickly and to try to anticipate what would be good for the reader. Because compared to the other forms of art, a story, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but to me, writing and a story is for someone else. And I'm reading Letters to a Young Poet, which I've never read before, I hadn't heard of before until Adam Savage mentioned it. But I'm reading it, and it's talking about how you shouldn't write for someone else, and you should write for yourself. And they're talking about poetry and stuff, but I'm not going to write a children's book for myself. Like, to write a children's book, you want it to be something relatable, something that will work with kids, and that instantly puts you in the spot compared to the other things I've done of this is for someone else. This has to be for someone else. And I might not like this decision, but I know that who it's for, they would like it. And that was definitely a step to the side from what I'm used to doing. And I'm used to being able to say like, no. Even if other people wouldn't like that, that's what feels right to me. That's where my artistic expression is unfolding. But here, I had to be very cautious of the audience, and it's an unforgiving audience. Kids, if you've ever tried to do magic, they're hecklers. And they'll tell you what's good and what's bad, and they'll tell you while reading a book, I don't like this. This one's boring. Or they'll just walk away. That's a unique audience that I'm not used to catering to. And so that was definitely a big lesson here and a struggle to try to anticipate what an audience that I cannot understand because I'm an adult, what would resonate with a kid. I'm projecting a little bit. But as I do production for our kids show, it's the same thing of I'm now second guessing and wondering like, yeah, I think this part looks great. Would a kid think that? Does this move too quickly? Does it move too slowly? So that's definitely where I struggle. Where I thrived with this was, I think, having the characters ready. With Larry the Lion, I wasn't struggling to come up with things because I already had a catalog of characters to pull from, which was helpful, although probably cheating. What would I do differently next time? I'd slow down. I think I'd involve more people and get more eyes on it. Maybe write it with my son and sort of go through the story a little bit with him and start with the audience instead of starting with what I think they would like, and then maybe working backwards to find a way to insert the values and the themes I was going for, rather than starting with that and then trying to find a story that fulfills that. That may be backwards, but what would I do differently next time? I'd do it that way and find out which way was right. How does this apply to my primary discipline? We talked about that. Learn some respect for experts. Absolutely. I think this is the stuff where I've read so many kids' books, that I've criticized so many kids' books. And as co-host of the Hardy & Sons podcast, I've read and critiqued a lot of Hardy Boys books, chapter by chapter. I don't know how many episodes we have. Well over 100 episodes. And I've criticized a lot of authors, but man, putting pen to paper is tough. And I think even like anything, making a video is hard. People may look at my videos, or I may look at other videos, though I've gotten much better at this, and say, yeah, I don't like his videos. And people may say like, he doesn't know what he's doing. The lighting's off, the audio, he doesn't know what he's doing. Where's your video? And this is the same thing of, where's my story? I don't have a good one at this point, and respect to anyone who has created that and published it and got it out there in the world where it can have some positive effect on somebody. Bonus points for collaboration. Yeah, I'd like to collaborate next time. And how much better would it be if you didn't feel shame? This one would be improved. I had a little bit of nervousness about being judged with this one because I'm so familiar with so many children's books, and so are most of my peers. And most of my friends have kids the same age right now, and they know a good children's story from a bad one. And so this is really stepping into somebody else's wheelhouse. It's much less subjective because you can see in your own kids, like, yeah, my kid wouldn't like that. And so I think I was cautious going into it, and maybe if I could release some of that pressure on myself, I could write a different story or a better story. But yeah, that's all I got. That's what I learned from trying to write a kid story and taking a lesson away to be a better video producer. Those are my thoughts. You should try it. You really should. You should be trying all of these. That's why I'm making these. And if you're watching this, take 5 minutes and do it. You'll be glad you did. You'll learn something. And if not, then you wrote a perfect kids book and you can publish it and become famous. That's all I got. Have a great day or night or whatever, wherever. See you later. Bye.